everybody. I'm excited to announce today's guest. His name is Congressman Jim Langevin. Jim Langevin was born on April 22nd, 1964. He was the first quadriplegic to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. At the age of 16, Jim Langevin was injured while working with the Warwick Police Department in the Boy Scout Explorer program. A gun accidentally discharged and a bullet struck Congressman Langevin, leaving him paralyzed. This is how Representative Langevin recalled that moment. I was in the locker room of the police station one afternoon getting ready to go on my shift. Two police officers were looking at a new weapon that one of them had purchased. Not realizing the gun was loaded, one of the officers pulled the trigger and the bullet ricocheted off the locker room and went through my neck and severed my spinal cord. I have been paralyzed ever since. The tremendous outpouring of support from his community inspired Congressman Langevin to give something back and enter public service. Congressman Langevin graduated from Rhode Island College and earned a master's degree in public administration from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. He resides in Warwick, Rhode Island. Without further ado, let's listen in on my conversation with Congressman Langevin. Thank you so much for coming on, Congressman Jim Langevin. Welcome to the Traipse and Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Of course. So we're gonna start straight away with our question. So the first question, I know you've been in Congress for a couple decades now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Why do you think and there aren't very many people in Congress. I interned on the House side, and then I worked in the Senate side for a while. So I know there are not a lot of people with physical disabilities in Congress. And so I was wondering, why do you think you've been able to be so successful running as a person with a very visible physical disability? And that's particularly interesting and, noticeable to me is because I also use a manual wheelchair. And so I really notice it when people with disabilities are in Congress or in places I don't see very often.
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. Thanks for having me on the program. And I'm honored to be with you tonight. And I hope your listeners and viewers enjoy the program. It's been an absolute thrill and a real honor for me to be serving the United States Congress now for almost 2 decades. It's amazing how fast the time has gone by. When I look back, and I just think of all the years that have gone by, the experience that I've had, it really is just mind-numbing. But it really has been the thrill and honor of a lifetime to be able to represent the people at Rhode Island 2nd Congressional District. In terms of me being successful and having a disability, I've always tried to focus on my goals and dreams and setting my standards high, not letting challenges or obstacles get in my way. And I've never really looked at myself as a disabled candidate running. I'm just a candidate who happens to have a disability. And I've never really made my disability the focus of who I am or what I do. Like everyone, we all have things that interest us and goals and dreams. And my interest is in public service and trying to make our community better than the way we found it. And I had a real interest in community and public service from a very early age when I thought I was going to go into law enforcement when I was a young police cadet. And that didn't work out, but I really have enjoyed public service in another aspect. And so I pursued the things that I found of interest and worked hard to make a difference. I also, although I never made disabilities a central, theme of who I am or what I'm about. I also recognize though that as someone who lives with a disability, I have a responsibility to open up doors and bring down barriers for others who also have goals and dreams, but may not have had the help along the way, or have had the success that I've had. But there's no reason why others can't realize their goals and dreams, and especially serving in public office in different places. So wherever I could be a voice or a vote in that respect, I certainly have always looked out those leadership opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much. And how do you think Congress can be more wheelchair accessible? You've been there for a couple decades. What infrastructural changes have you seen in the House or Senate side, or even in the Capitol building? So as I told you earlier, I was in the Senate. Was working for my Oregon senator, and just during that short period that I was there, they were able to install an automatic door in their front office. And so I want to hear your thoughts and see what changes have you've seen over the last couple of decades.
Sure, and there's been many changes, some subtle, others have been bigger changes. Certainly, when I first arrived in Congress, they really had never had someone like me serving in Congress before, and there were things that needed to be done to make my service possible. Just for example, changes, renovations made to my office, and automatic door openers, and make sure doorways were wide enough. Also on the House floor, removing a couple of seats on the House floor so I had a place to park, basically. And I call it the ultimate handicapped accessible parking. It's a front row seat in the United States Congress. And so they removed a couple of seats on the chairs on the House floor that are usually fixed to the floor. They changed the lecterns in the House floor in the well. They used to have these wooden lecterns that weren't affixed to the floor, and I couldn't get close enough to them because my wheelchair, the footrest on my wheelchair would hit the base of the lectern, so I couldn't put my speech on there and then see it. It's too far away and reach it. So the craftsmen in the House woodworking shop did a great job of crafting these beautiful mahogany or cherry wood pedestals that have a lectern that comes out a little bit further. There's a neck on it that comes further, so I can get up close to it. The lecterns are fixed to the floor, and everybody uses them. And they really was a nice addition to the house, and they look very classy. Then there was the different changes they made to my committee rooms, kind of making them accessible one committee room at a time. So whether it was Small Business Committee or the House Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, they made them accessible as they went along, and they were working slowly and sure, but making sure that all of the committee rooms are accessible. So they have a lot of work to do. One thing that was thrilling 10 years ago during the, 5 years ago during the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I was able to preside over the U.S. House of Representatives. First time someone in a wheelchair had actually presided over the U.S. House, and that was possible because they put in two special lifts in the floor of the rostrum, the speaker's rostrum, so that I could get up to the speaker's rostrum. There really wasn't an easy way to put in a ramp or a lift, and so they had some really genius ideas that they batted around, and this is when they decided. So two lifts got me up to the top of the rostrum, and now I can preside over the U.S. House like anybody else.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear the different changes, and hopefully it becomes systemic and structural as well, so that in case there are more people with disabilities like yourself who come into Congress in larger
Yeah, I've
groups.
often said that I've said that I may be the first quadriplegic to serve in the United States Congress, but hopefully I will not be the last. And I really do hope that there's others who will be able to serve in Congress that have any variety of disabilities. No one should be denied the ability to serve because of a disability. I like the word ability, not the dis. We all have abilities. Steny Hoyer has said this many times, our majority leader, and one of the original authors of the Americans with Disabilities Act, that we all have different abilities, and we should be able to use our gifts and talents to share with the world, and again, set our goals and standards, our dreams, and do everything we can to achieve.
Exactly. So another thing I wanted to ask about in Congress before moving on to disability advocacy is, so I know that having a sound and safe evacuation plan was kind of a point of contention when I was in Congress, just because they didn't have very many staffers that were in manual wheelchairs for me. I know you use a different kind. Can you go into detail on what kind of plans they've implemented for you for evacuation plans? Because I feel like, those evacuation drills, I always treated it like practice and drills because, it seemed like a joke. And it was very haphazard, and my colleagues really didn't know what to do. And the plan that was put in place, in a real situation, it really wouldn't work, to put it
Yeah, and
bluntly.
that is a very good question. I don't think that until a situation really arrives, right, do we know that an evacuation plan is going to actually work. And that's why it's so important to have these special plans in place as a forethought rather than an afterthought. And so I can't say with high confidence that I think they've got it down to a science yet. I know there are plans in place and equipment in place that they could use for people with disabilities in the event that they have to evacuate someone that has mobility impairments. And so that's something that really needs to be practiced over and over again and drilled. And so it's this practice behind it, not just figure it out the day when this stuff hits the fan and you actually have to use it. So you prompt me to ask that question, and I'm going to circle back with my staff to just go over those evacuation plans, not just for me, but for anyone, either someone's working in the Capitol complex or someone is a member of the public who's coming to visit.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me as a person with disabilities, going through various evacuation drills, either being elementary school, middle school, high school, college even, and then through the various employment environments, I've always just assumed there's no plan B for me, because usually I don't see other people with disabilities in my environments. And so if anything happens, like, I'm screwed, and so is other people with disabilities in similar situations. And so, anyways, I think giving some careful thought to it would really be helpful, especially,
Yeah.
I think, assuming that emergencies will never happen is not exactly practical or ideal.
Yeah, I completely agree that we need to have those things in place ahead of time. And I've actually worked with some of my colleagues on that very plan for for example, FEMA, pressing FEMA to think about this in disaster planning, so that if there's ever a some kind of a natural disaster, some kind of a crisis, that that people with disabilities are thought of ahead of time, as opposed to it just after the fact or get left behind. We cannot allow that to happen. By thinking of things ahead of time, we can make sure that the right kind of planning is put in place, or whether it's accessible shelters or other programs that people with disabilities need. We need to make sure that they're in place and well thought out.
So we were just talking about, rhetoric on the word disability, right? Taking the dis out of it. So one article wrote, when most people meet him, referring to you, they do not think of him as disabled. Instead, they view him as a man of passion, energy, and accomplishment. So what are your thoughts on being viewed as disabled? Is it something negative or positive? Why? And if that word needs to be changed, do you have any ideas of what other words could be used to describe our group?
Yeah, and I think all too often we perhaps just without thinking about it, people make judgments about people as soon as they meet them, and it's not right to judge a book by its cover, and so none of us should make assumptions about other people without getting to know them first. So there's no denying the fact that I have a very visible physical disability, and so people may jump to conclusions or assumptions right away when meeting me, but after time, hopefully they know that there's more to me than just meets the eye. For example, if someone were to meet me and see me, perhaps they think that all I do is work on disabilities issues. Where really my major focus of my work in Congress has been on national security related issues. I specialized in cybersecurity and directed energy programs. I chair a subcommittee on the House Armed Services Committee on intelligence, emerging threats, and capabilities. So, and have served on that committee for almost 20 years now, and also a senior member of the Homeland Security Committee. So many of my colleagues who know me and have seen my work know my work in cybersecurity most especially, and then on career and technical education, working on job training issues so that we make sure our young people have the right skills to go into in-demand jobs now. But then on top of that, sure, disabilities issues are also something I'm passionate about. That's why I co-created and co-chaired to this day the Disabilities Caucus. And I'm very proud of the work that we do and try to raise awareness among members and staff to try to educate them about important issues that are important to the disabilities community. So there's no denying that right off the bat maybe people are going to jump to conclusions, but I hope that with any of us we should get to know people first before making judgments.
Mhm. Yeah. And then moving on to housing, I know housing is definitely a big issue for me and for a lot of people with, mobility disabilities, especially. I'm actually currently in the midst of trying to find alternative housing, and it's very hard to find housing that's wheelchair accessible, as you know, and the ones that are accessible are on the more expensive end. Um, Buildings that have elevators, buildings have that have other amenities that people with certain other kinds of disabilities may need. Um, and so, how have you been able to make housing more accessible for Rhode Islanders with disabilities? I know you specifically represent them, but then also Americans at large.
Yeah, and so affordable housing is a big issue and a difficult one, as well as accessible housing. So accessible, affordable housing it needs to have more resources put behind it, and certainly I've always been proud to advocate for and support efforts to provide those resources, both at the state level. We recently had a bond issue for more affordable housing, accessible housing, and our federal housing people here in Rhode Island are pushing out federal dollars wherever they can to create more affordable housing. But you're right. We are woefully under resourced there, and so when we go through the appropriations process again this time, I'll be looking for ways to advocate that our appropriators will find the resources and put resources into both again affordable housing and accessible housing. That's a huge issue, and I'm glad you certainly raised it.
Yeah. And next I want to cover employment, all these, very big topics that really affect people's lives. Have you employed people with disabilities in your offices, either in the state offices or here in the Capitol? If yes, what kinds of disabilities did they have, and how have they been an asset to your team? And if not, how do you think you can go about expanding that area?
Yeah, and so the answer is yes, I have, but I found that not enough people with disabilities have applied for jobs in my office. We're an equal opportunity employer, and yes, I have employed people with disabilities, but I'd like to provide more opportunities. And perhaps we've got to do a better job at reaching out more and looking for people with disabilities to apply. But that's something that's one of the things that is probably one of the biggest frustrations I've had in the job so far, is looking around and not seeing enough people with disabilities working on Capitol Hill. Although there are some, I know the federal government is working on bringing down those doors, providing more and more opportunities. I have actually co-sponsored or co-led a letter with Senator Tammy Duckworth, asking for the federal government to give a detailed accounting of how they're doing with employing people with disabilities, just like we need diversity in all walks of life, so that the federal workforce really more reflects the the society that we all work for and we all represent. And so I definitely want to see those opportunities provided, because if you look at it, as far as we've gone with promoting the Americans with Disabilities Act and realizing that promise, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is still far too high when you compare that to the national average. You know, we say we employ people with disabilities that, you know, there are a whole range of disabilities. Some are visible, others are not. And so it's not just about, you know, employing people with visible disabilities. You know, it's looking across the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. No, I definitely understand that. At the same time, I also understand, I think that image shift is very important. Having, people that look like us in very prominent, powerful places helps shift prejudice and stigma much faster as well.
Yes.
So I know you were the first person in a wheelchair to be elected in the House of Representatives nearly 20 years ago. So has there been other wheelchair users, people with physical disabilities that have been elected in the House of Representatives? I mean, I know Tammy Duckworth is in the Senate. And then, there are some staffers here and there that have a physical disabilities.
So the answer is yes. And as I'm told, there was someone a couple decades before me, a paraplegic who served in the Congress. And I don't know much about that individual. He was obviously long gone before my service. I know that I'm the first quadriplegic to serve in the Congress, and it means that 4 limbs are affected. I use an electric wheelchair to get around. Tammy Duckworth came a few terms after I was elected, and she and I served together for a period of time. And then she's obviously now pretty proud that she's in the Senate. And then I know my colleague Brian Mast from Florida is a double amputee and was wounded in combat, and also Dan Crenshaw. Dan lost an eye in service to the country. Both fine members. They're Republican colleagues of mine. We get along great, and we look for ways to collaborate and work together on issues. But I'd like to see more people with disabilities running for office and serving. And in fact, I understand that there's a gentleman, a paraplegic, who's just won the Republican primary in one of the states, one of the southern states, and we'll see what happens in that race.
Yeah, that's exciting. My brother just told me about that. So as the New York Times reported, and I'll quote here, the special wheelchair Mr. Langevin pilots, which was designed by the same inventor who created the Segway, allows him to raise himself up to about 5 feet tall, and so he can meet people at closer to eye level, a useful position when your business is in politics, unquote. So is this wheelchair accessible? Is this wheelchair accessible to the broader public who have a lot of who do not have a lot of access to monetary funds, as you know, because around 70% of people people with disabilities are unemployed. If not, how are you ensuring that these kinds of technologies are more accessible to the population that really need to use them?
Yeah, you ask a very good question, and we have not been able to get Medicare or Medicaid to cover this wheelchair yet. It is only private pay individuals, and in my case, insurance covered part of it, but I had to pay a significant amount for the chair. And these chairs that I have now, I actually have 2 of them, but they're old. I think I got the first one back in 2004, and so they're coming to their end of their life, I think. And there's a new model that just came out that I may be able to get in the near future, but it is expensive, and it's so for someone that's on Medicare, Medicaid right now, it's out of reach, and it's wrong. It would be, not everyone maybe would need the technology that I have, or maybe they would want it. I'm not sure, but they should have access to it and be able to, if they need it, and it would help them live more actively and independently. It certainly has, the technology has brought down a lot of barriers, opened up a lot of doors for me, including traveling to third world countries that aren't necessarily known for their accessibility, but because of the thing this chair can do, like going up and down curbs, it's been a real game changer for me, just made me much more mobile and independent.
Hmm.
So
And
I've tried over the years, and I'm going to continue to try to get this chair covered by Medicare and Medicaid. That's a fight worth having.
great, thank you so much. I know that a lot of people appreciate that effort. Next, my co-host Jean Mishner is going to ask you a few questions.
Go right ahead.
Yeah,
Sure.
Jean is actually joining us from Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne, Australia. Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Congressman, it's a real pleasure and honor to speak with you today, and I really appreciate you giving us the time, especially for someone who's been serving the public for 20 years and more. So it really is appreciated.
Honored to be with you. Thank you. I've had the privilege of traveling to Australia several years ago. It's a beautiful country. I was in Melbourne briefly, and Sydney, and Alice Springs, which is in the middle of nowhere. So
it is a wonderful place, and during lockdown we have more opportunities to travel internally and appreciate our country a little bit more.
Sure, so, absolutely.
Yeah. So my questions will be more centered around climate change. So we'll just kick off and ask, why do you think people with disabilities should be included in the climate change discussions?
Yeah, so climate change is a very serious issue that affects all of us worldwide, and it's real and it's here. And unless we act, we are going to be in a real world of trouble. And so one of the things is we would need to focus on certainly the consequences of climate change, but also the opportunities of climate change. We have the opportunity to create a whole new green economy. So making us both energy independent, but also creating new technologies that are going to put people to work. And hopefully many of those technologies, there are fields that with people with disabilities could be employed. And so whether it's the designing of the technology or the building of the technology, it's something that's important to the whole world. So we want to make sure that we are, again, energy independent, work hard to create technologies that reduce our greenhouse gases, but again, create the jobs that are going to build these technologies going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And it actually brings to mind that people working from home may already be set up to work more efficiently in that case. And perhaps that might be some opportunities for some people to be more included in the workforce, particularly when it comes to new technologies that are more technology dependent.
You said it. You know, the one thing, if there's any silver lining in this, this COVID-19 crisis that we are going through, and God, it's just been just so awful in terms of how it's upended everyone's lives, and too many people have lost their lives because of this terrible virus. It's also forced companies and individuals to reimagine and rework how they do business. And was become readily apparent to many employers is that employees can work remotely. They can work from home and get business done. And in my mind, that provides a great opportunity for people with disabilities, especially who might have been denied opportunities before because of transportation issues, which is another area that we have to work on. You know, I've often said that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is far too high. Although the ADA has been an amazing tool for bringing down barriers and open up opportunities, it doesn't do anyone any good if they can apply for the job and they can get to the job if they can't get to the job. And so public transportation for people with disabilities is still really lacking. We've introduced a bill to one of my colleagues to try to address that. But this is an opportunity now to reimagine the workforce. And I know that many companies, even when we find a vaccine or antivirals that allow us to open back up, the companies aren't going to go back to doing business the way they did. And instead of having a big footprint in commercial real estate, a lot of employees are going to be working from home. And so, there's an opportunity for people with disabilities to really shine and hopefully take advantage of those coming job opportunities that are here today.
Yeah, definitely there will be a change, and it's nice that it'll come through technology, and some people may benefit on the other side.
Yeah.
Um, so with that in mind, actually, in terms of climate change, how can we or encourage people with disabilities to participate more in that discussion?
Yeah, so I hope that we can continue to educate people about the effects of climate change and how it's going to make things more difficult in terms of where we live and how we live. One of the things that's important to include people with disabilities is the consequences of, for example, severe storms and the frequency and intensity of storms and how that's going to affect people's safety and how that if these superstorms keep happening more frequently and it upends people's lives and forces people into crisis and having to go into shelters, how are we providing for the care and safety of people with disabilities so that they can go to a shelter or a location that may have to be an alternative because of either tornadoes or hurricanes that hit against rising sea level, rise that displace people and where they live. So all of this, we need to find ways to involve people with disabilities in this conversation, and hopefully listen to some creative ideas that are going to make it better.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that covers my next question, which was how do we better include those discussions in the places that they need to happen? If it's not people like Ming who reaches out, what can everyday people who may be working from home or have other situations without that reach, how can they help that push?
So I would say that it's always important to reach out to your members of Congress, the members of the House and Senate and their staff, give them your perspective on, say how climate change is affecting you, but also your ideas and thoughts, how you can make things better. Sharing those perspectives. And I haven't really thought a lot about how people with disabilities can be a part of that conversation. As I am, see that everyone has a stake in this, whether you have a disability or not. We all have a stake in this, making the planet better and safer and cleaner, and make the environment more sustainable for the future. And so maybe I better really think about that again too, about how it perhaps disproportionately affects people with disabilities when it comes to the consequences of climate change, and then involving people with disabilities more in the solutions. But being advocates is always important, and reaching out to your elected officials in Australia, just like we should be reaching out to our elected officials at the state, local level, and federal level here in the United States.
Yeah,
Definitely.
exactly. Thank you. Thank you for that. So next, I want to ask you some slightly different, which is stem cell. I know one of your top priorities has been advancing the science of stem cell research, recognizing it as you're recognized as a national leader. You champion the passage of HR 3, the Stem Cell Research Enhancement Act, and its predecessor, HR 810, which called for the expansion of the federal policy on embryonic stem cell research. So why do you believe so fervently in the potential of stem cell research? And how do you think the advancements in stem cell research will improve the livelihoods of people with disabilities particularly?
So stem cells are unique cells in that they can become any cell in the body and could potentially offer incredible treatments for some of these life's most challenging chronic conditions and diseases. Now, I don't believe in creating embryos just for research purposes. The embryos where the stem cells could come from would be embryos created for in vitro fertilization, and in that process, more embryos are actually created that are actually going to be used. And right now, what happens is those embryos, sadly, are when the couples have the number of children they want to have, or they have decided they're not going to go forward any longer. Those embryos are just discarded, and I think that's sad that would happen in the first place. I would hope in cases where embryos can be adopted, that and they can be implanted and help an infertile couple to have a child that who has not been able to. That should be the first option. But in cases where embryos are going to be discarded as medical waste, I'd much prefer that we donate the embryos to research and medical science that hopefully could help potentially millions of people. But I'm also a big advocate of research in general, the NIH, and including I've been a great champion of the congressionally directed medical research program at the Pentagon. Many people don't realize that the Pentagon does a lot of work in medical research, everything from breast cancer to things like spinal cord injury research. And I've been able to significantly increase the amount of money for spinal cord injury research over the years. And so now we're putting $40 million a year in spinal cord injury research. And I'm optimistic that in the future we'll find cures and treatments for spinal cord injuries. So it affects people in all walks of life, not only men and women who served in the military, but had spinal cord injuries in combat, but also other accidents that have occurred just in life, men and women who experience spinal cord injuries. And so anyway, for a variety of reasons, I'm always looking to support medical research. And just like we need to see research right now because of COVID-19. And a lot of the work, if you have success in antivirals or finding a vaccine, a lot of that preliminary research came out of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and I oversee that in my subcommittee. And I've had a briefing from them. It's extraordinary the amount of preliminary work that they've done. It's just cutting edge. So research has great benefits for the whole world.
Yeah, no, and we are lucky to have such a wonderful advocate on the Hill doing, this kind of work. So, yeah, Jean's going to take over for a couple more questions again.
Great. Thank you, Ming. So the next topic is cybersecurity, one of your passions. So we see you as an expert and a leader in cybersecurity. So we want to know if you feel comfortable with this role, given that you didn't come into it with a computer science background, but now you have lots of running experience with it. So how did you make that jump across to that field?
Sure. Well, the ironic part of it is I don't have a technical background by training. I was a political science and public administration major in college. I have my master's in public administration, and I kind of fell into this role of cybersecurity when I chaired a subcommittee on the Homeland Security Committee that had jurisdiction over cyber. And I didn't realize what a big deal it was going to become then. But the more and more I did a deep dive, I realized, wow, this is a real problem and a real security risk for not only the United States, but also the entire world. The internet is an amazing thing, and it's really transformed our economy, our way of life. We all use the internet every day in some way, shape, or form for communication or banking or commerce. But the internet was never built with security in mind. And since then, we've been always layering security on top of this free and open architecture. And it's a lot of vulnerabilities that enemies and adversaries or criminal enterprises or just rogue hackers have been able to take advantage of. And it's cost our country trillions of dollars in intellectual property that have been lost and also jobs as well. So I've made it my mission to try to strengthen our cybersecurity posture, and whether it's my work in Congress on the Armed Services Committee or on the Homeland Security Committee, or in the caucus, the Cybersecurity Caucus that I co-created and co-chaired with Mike McCall, a congressman and colleague of mine from Texas, or in this Cyber Solarium Commission that I was just a part of to try to create an overarching architecture for stronger cybersecurity policy for the country. So yeah, it's a very important issue to the country, and I'll continue to fight for stronger cyber protections for the country going forward.
Yeah, definitely. It is always playing an increasingly more important role in areas of security and national security.
It's even allowing us to have this conversation today over the internet, right? So.
Yeah. So what can we do to better protect ourselves, particularly when it comes to international interference or the copying of IP? Many of that can be related to security concerns or internet security. What more can we be doing?
To make the internet more secure or protect ourselves?
And particularly for the copying of IP.
Yeah, so obviously we need to instill the message, even in our young people, and that starts with the very youngest ages, that we all have responsibility to keep the internet secure. And I think I've often said we need a public education campaign akin to like a Smokey the Bear campaign just like Smokey the Bear was so you can prevent forest fires. Well, we need a similar type of campaign to educate the public about you can really help to prevent cyber vulnerabilities, intrusions, or theft. And you do things like making sure that you have a strong password, you're updating your security patches, that you don't click on malicious links or attachments. If we did even just had really good basic cyber hygiene, if everyone exercised that, it would go a long way toward the malicious things happening. Now, of course, if you're talking about defending against a nation state, that's different. The average individual isn't going to be able to defend against a nation state attack like from China or Russia. But that's why we have the U.S. military and U.S. Cyber Command and the NSA and also the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. So there are operational arms of the government that are working to protect the country in cyberspace with amazingly dedicated people. We need to continue to support their efforts. And that's the work of the Cybersecurity Commission as well, by the way. The concept of creating this layered cyber defense so that we're strengthening our cyber defenses as a deterrent, raising costs on our adversaries, and if need be, taking more forward-leaning action to protect the country in cyberspace.
For anyone at home, good reminder to update your passwords regularly, and that will also help protect the greater society that you currently live in or work in.
Yeah, exactly. Great reminder. So now we're on to the last question. Congressman, thank you so much. So the last question, our curiosity is, do you have plans to run for a higher office, even perhaps the Senate or even the presidency? I think I would love to see someone with a mobility disability run for president and, be in that role.
Thank you. Well, I'm very flattered by the question, but right now I'm very content doing my job as the United States Congressman from Rhode Island, enjoying the work. I don't know what the future holds. We'll see. I don't have any plans to run for president, I can tell you that. These days, I don't know if that's a job that I would want or enjoy. But again, we've got a great candidate in Joe Biden, who's running for president of the Democratic side right now. I hope he's successful. But in any event, I enjoyed serving in the Congress, enjoyed public service. I don't know what the future holds. Right now, I'm just focusing on my reelection coming up in November. I also have a primary in September, so and then hopefully on to November if I'm successful in September. But I take nothing for granted and look forward to an active campaign and hopefully victories in September and November.
Yeah, well, we are very lucky to have you up on the Hill representing us, people with mobility disabilities. And I know you represent the whole state of Rhode Island and have the interests of Americans at large at your heart. And thank you. Anyways, thank you so much for setting such a good example as a public servant, as someone with a visible physical disability.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I hope that those are listening or watching our podcast tonight, that somebody out there might think about running for office themselves. Doesn't have to be for Congress. You can start out like I did at the local level. I ran and was elected as a state representative, but there's also the city or town councils, and or again, the House, the local state House and state Senate races, or Congress or the Senate. Set your goals high, go for your dreams. I know that there's many people that have the same kind of interest in public service that I do. Whether you're working on a campaign or you throw your hat in the ring to run, it's a great, honorable career, and I hope other people think about running for public office.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for your time today and giving us such insightful responses. I know
You're
you have to.
welcome, and thank you so much for having me too.
Did you like this video? If so, share with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsingglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.